But the end all and be all of power in America should be the people. Elections. It should, and the result was clear. And so I think
it actually was pretty close.
It was close, but it was clear.
Good afternoon, beautiful people, and happy Monday. You know, sometimes you watch a political interview and think to yourself, there is no way that this is real. And then somehow it gets even worse. AOC had another bad media appearance, a full-blown masterclass on selective outrage, wrapped in ideological fantasy, delivered very confidently, just to actually sound pretty stupid. So let's talk about it. Welcome to Nelly Miranda. As always, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Okay, so AOC sat down for this interview, or discussion, if you will, and she is arguing that courts stepping in on Virginia's map situation was somehow an attack on democracy itself. She claimed that the courts overturned the will of the people and acted like there was this overwhelming public mandate behind it all. But then the host quietly had to correct her because the vote wasn't some massive landslide. It was close, very close.
Redistricting in Tennessee, North Carolina, Texas, Florida, Missouri, none of that challenged or overturned by the courts, despite very clear and brazen constitutional violations, such as in the state of Florida, right? But that, you know, they've bought their courts, and so it's not going through. But what the difference is here in the state of Virginia is that all those other states I just listed, those maps were passed by their state legislatures. Virginia was an election of 3 million Americans. This court did not overturn a map. It overturned an election. An election. And when we talk about the balance of power and in a system of checks and balances, it's one thing for a court to check a legislature or an executive, but the end all and be all of power in America should be the people. Elections. It should, and the result was clear. And so I think
it actually was pretty close.
It was close, but it was clear.
AOC really tried to frame this as though everyone agreed with her, when in reality, the country, and Virginia specifically, remains deeply divided on these issues. Now, whether people support or oppose redistricting fights is one thing, but the broader issue here is something that we've seen repeatedly in modern politics. Politicians only love judicial activism when the judges agree with them. When courts strike down conservative laws, many on the left call it protecting democracy. And then when the courts interfere with progressive policies, suddenly it becomes an assault on democracy. How dare they? And then they act like the world is basically coming to an end. And that contradiction is exactly why these debates keep exploding online. But it gets even more interesting because AOC then pivoted into this broader argument about wealth, billionaires, and the American Revolution. She quite literally framed the American Revolution as some kind of anti-rich uprising against the billionaires of that era, and that could not be further from the truth.
The American Revolution was against the billionaires of their time. And we are declaring independence from such an extreme marriage of wealth and power and the state. The concentration of wealth in this country has gotten so dire and so extreme that you can literally name the people who have half of the wealth in this country. It's gotten so extreme that you can name Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, the Waltons. And so, of course, when we criticize the system's gotten so concentrated that they take it as criticisms of themselves. And frankly, of course, they take it personally, because when you are completely unwilling to look at and be as invested in our country as an everyday American is, which is really what we're talking about with mass concentration of wealth. What kind of society do we want to live in? What is good for the country? And then what is good for myself?
You see, actually, many of the founding fathers were themselves wealthy landowners, slave owners, businessmen, lawyers, and political elites of their time. George Washington was one of the wealthiest men in America during that era. Thomas Jefferson owned massive amounts of land. John Hancock was literally a merchant businessman. So the revolution was not some socialist uprising against private wealth. It was primarily about independence, self-governance, taxation, representation, and political sovereignty. So in trying to push her socialist agenda, AOC is constantly trying to rewrite history. She presents wealth as this bad thing, like it's inherently suspicious. And she may not be a billionaire, but she is not broke. And so pushing the idea that success is bad, and if you achieved it, you're somehow a monster, is lunatic. And also, who in their right mind is not thinking about their household first? You can think about your country by voting for people who have the best interest for our country. You can be a model citizen, you can raise your kids correctly, but punishing economic success and claiming that the wealthy should think about the country first, think about people they do not know first, and then themselves second is insane. America is very much an individualistic society, and to pretend that it's anything but that is crazy. And then she went on to tell us that her biggest ambition isn't holding a bigger office, but her ultimate goal is to structurally change the country. Take a listen.
They assume that my ambition is positional. They assume that my ambition is a title or a seat. And my ambition is way bigger than that. My ambition is to change this country. And presidents come and go, Senate, House seats, elected officials come and go, but single-payer health care is forever. A living wage is forever. Workers' rights are forever. Women's rights, all of that. And so, anyways, a finer point to your question is that when you aren't attached, right? When you haven't been like fantasizing about being this or that since the time you were 7 years old, it is tremendously liberating.
Now, her supporters will hear that and think, good. She wants healthcare reform. She wants workers' rights, wage increases, and social programs. But then her critics and those with common sense will hear and think that she is openly admitting that she wants to fundamentally transform the American system. One side believes that the government should play a dramatically larger role in healthcare, wages, housing, and economic equality. And then on the other side, others believe that expanding government power will reduce individual freedom, economic mobility, and personal responsibility. Everyone must be held accountable for their actions. You must be responsible for the choices that you make that put you in whatever economic situation you're in. We cannot punish the rich for that one. One argument I hear all the time is that, oh, the wealthy stay wealthy and then they pass it along to their children and it's not fair. And yes, maybe it isn't, but life isn't fair. But if you are poor and starting from nothing, it is completely up to you to change the trajectory of your life. You don't need Jeff Bezos type of money to lead a fulfilling life. The left have to quit discouraging the youth. Can we go back to the times where people tell people you don't work, you don't eat? That is literally the attitude that we need to have in order to create more successful people. You don't work, you don't eat. Not tax the rich or eat the rich. Anyways, in this next clip, in another interview, AOC argued that Black Americans created democracy in this country. And then she followed that up with immigrants being central to American history. Take a listen.
There are very few like real archetypes of, in my opinion, truly what America is all about. I think about the civil rights and voting rights movement and how Black Americans really created democracy in this country.
Right. That's exactly right.
How they literally made something from nothing. It is just beyond me. I think about how, like, Native people have survived and preserved and treasured their culture. I think about, and I think many of us think about immigrants, which if you aren't from one of those first two populations, you are certainly from largely the third. And so many of us, like, have our story of our parents, our grandparents, our great-great-grandparents, and so on and so forth. And who, like, come and make something from nothing. And I think that's a big part of also the most inspiring elements of what America is all about.
Now, depending on interpretation, some might say that she was referring to the expansion of civil rights, voting rights, and democratic participation throughout the civil rights movement. Critics, however, interpreted it literally and accused her of erasing the constitutional founding of the country itself. Because if we are honest, no serious historian would argue that Black Americans literally founded democracy from scratch. I think that they would rather agree that the civil rights movement forced America to live up more fully to its democratic ideals. And those two are two very different statements. Now, historically, immigration absolutely played a major role in building the United States. There's no denying that. But immigration policies has also shifted dramatically across different eras. The United States has gone through periods of extremely open immigration, periods of severe restriction, industrial labor expansion, refugee programs, and modern border debates where we've had the open borders during the Biden administration. And this is another issue where Americans are also deeply divided. Some see immigration as a source of economic growth, labor expansion, and national renewal, and then others believe that mass immigration, especially illegal immigration, strains infrastructure, lowers wages in certain sectors, and weakens national cohesion because, unfortunately, some groups are not able to integrate into the American system. Maybe they can, but they are choosing not to. But to circle back, AOC is arguably one of the most effective political performers in America today, whether people love her or hate her. She understands how to generate emotional reactions. She gets the headlines, the viral clips, and ideological loyalty. She has political influence. She's not necessarily an expert on policies, but she does have influence. So what are your thoughts? Do you think AOC is genuinely reshaping the future of the Democratic Party? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and please don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.